Hello and welcome back to Oak Leaf Insights. I have talked about how the Ptolemaic definition of a degree on Earth is 500 stadia in my video on Thule, and how that definition afterwards we used 600 stadia for a degree, which we use today. But this 500 stadia per degree is very, very important because that makes the meridian from Meiro all the way up to Thule fit perfectly onto Scandinavia. I've shown this before. I will now show how this actually makes Atlantis fit on Scandinavia as well. And I've gone over this before in my video. I will go over it here quickly just to freshen up the memory so you don't have to watch all the 40 minutes or whatever that video is. In Plato's Critias, he talks about the measurements 2000 stadia and 3000 stadia, which we today in modern sources interpret as being only around the plane, and one side 2000, one side 3000. I will show you that this is actually quite complicated interpretation of what is being said, and that the more straightforward interpretation is actually just a length up and down. That is actually a more straightforward reading. So it looks like this. I use Perseus, which is a very good source, and Polytranslator is, I would say, the best machine translating of ancient Latin and Greek. It is very good, actually. And ChatGPT is also surprisingly good at translating ancient Latin and Greek. It is quite actually accurate. So I've used this as a comparative tool as well. And you can see here that this is the smooth plane of the country that is prominent. And in the modern translation, this word but is used in its secondary meaning and then it continues that the whole of the plane is this measurement of 2000 times 3000. But the primary meaning here is but. And if you look at other instances of this word being used, it is always but. So I would assume that it means but here as well. And it shifts back to the whole, meaning the whole country, which is supported by the fact that this whole section is expressly said to be about the country, and Plato has left talking about the city. So it actually makes very much sense, and it's a more, again, straightforward reading of what is being said. There are some other details you have to discuss for this to make even more sense, but I've discussed that in my video on the size of Atlantis. So go ahead and look at that video if you want to understand this wholly. Then it continues talking about the whole country. On, upon, towards, to, on, upon. This is the top side. On one hand, the top side, 3000 stadia. And then down, along, downwards, from the middle, upwards from the sea, 2000 stadia. So the bottom side counts that it is from the sea 2000 stadia up to the city. And this is a very intriguing thing, that he only says that the sea is on the south side, right? The top side then by implication does not have a sea. And this is very much true or logical if you think again that Nisos, the word that we've talked so much about, actually etymologically means a peninsula, because then the top side would be the peninsula, right? The side that doesn't have the sea is only the bottom side that has the sea. One question you will ask is, of course, then, but why would he only do a one-dimensional length? Why wouldn't he use width as well? And that is for a very simple historical reason, that the altitude was easily observable with natural phenomena, and there's no natural phenomena easily observable that decides your longitudes. Longitude was always guesswork, even in Ptolemy's work, which I've talked about. I will link it here as well. Which was expanded way too much north and eastwards, because everything was guesswork and the errors compounded, right? And this was about 100 CE. So that is why they only went by the latitudes, because you can just follow the Polaris, right? When Polaris is straight on top, you are at the North Pole. And when you see the Polaris being near the horizon, then you are at the equator. It is that simple. So then you just divide it into degrees, and then you have the degrees of the Earth. Or you can compare sun hours, the amount of sun hours, the longest day of the year. And then you also have the latitude. So this is actually quite simple, the latitude. And longitude is very complicated. until we got better measurement tools. But this 5,000 stadia is too short with today's definition of 600 stadia per degree, which is today we say the accurate measurement of the Earth. I don't know anything about it, so I'll just go with it. But that makes it too short, this one. I will say that the relationship between the center to the bottom, 2,000 stadia, and 3,000 stadia to the top, this is 60% and this bottom side is 40%. This is relationally true if Uppsala is the city of Atlantis, because yeah, that is 40% down here and 60% up here. So that is true. And then, again, from what was discussed in Thule, before Ptolemy, it was 500 stadia per degree, not 600 stadia as we use today. They used a circumference of the Earth that was 1/6 smaller than we use today. Why? This is 1/6 too small. That is what happened. Because if you divide 5,000 by 500, you get 10 degrees. And Scandinavia is precisely 10 degrees. And this is how it makes it fit perfectly in ancient definitions, just as in the meridian Thule, right? You have to use the ancient definitions, not the modern ones. And this is an important thing to realize as well, that no one literally measured the whole 5,000 stadia length, right? Of course, he had the degrees and then converted them into stadia. And he used the 500 stadia per degree conversion instead of 600. When I say he, I don't mean necessarily Plato, but the story itself used that definition. So yeah, that was just a finding I made a while ago, so I just wanted you to know that this was actually solved by me. So I will see you again soon.